can break down any functional analysis of a test management tool into over 100 separate features if you wanted to. Indeed, our side-by-side feature comparison identified just over 100 features. Obviously not all are big or critical features, however there are 7 core features, complex features, that every test management solution has to address in some way. And those 7 key features are assignment, version control, parameterization, libraries, result aggregation, retesting, configuration and releases. In this mini webinar I'm going to walk you through how Xray stands up to those 7 criteria. First then, test case assignment. Xray implements test cases as a standard Jira issue type. So you start out with the standard assignee and reporter values against your test case. Those assignee and reporter values are also used on the test sets, where a test set is a collection of test cases. So you can add either an individual test case or a whole test set to a test plan ready for execution. And the test case, the test set and the test plan can all be assigned to a particular user within your team. So if we go back and look at a test plan, so from the test cases we view all the test plans it's included in, and we open up the test plan, we'll see the test plan also has that assignee and reporter value. But where things really come into play is when we execute that test plan. So when we create an execution using all of the tests in the test plan, you'll see we can assign the whole execution to one particular tester. But we can take that a step further too, because whilst the whole test execution is assigned to one tester, the individual test cases can also be assigned to a different tester. To do that, we can scroll across on this grid and individual test cases can be assigned. The other option here then is to apply a filter or select particular test cases, and from there the selected test cases can be assigned in bulk. The other option we have here is we can apply a filter to select certain test cases, and we can even go as far as using JQL to search for those test cases and apply some quite complex search criteria before carrying out that assignment. So then the simplest way for me as a tester to work out which test runs or executions have been assigned to me is to use the filters and the search capability in Jira, because test executions are implemented as a Jira issue type, and I can search based on one or more projects and select the type of issue as execution, test execution, and status and assignee as assigned to me. Select on the assignee drop down, select myself and search on that, and these are all of the test executions that have been assigned to me at some stage. And of course you can further search or drill down on that based on versions, based on components and various other fields in Jira. Version control with Xray then. So in Xray the test cases are not marked with a specific version identifier like version 1, version 2, etc. However, every change to a test case is tracked, and those changes are tracked both within the usual Jira history when the issue itself is changed, and there's also an Xray history which covers the executions, updates in test plans, test sets, etc. But what's critical and what has been implemented well is the concept of locking a test case off once it's part of a test execution. So I can view my test runs or executions that this test case is part of, and if I was to open that execution or that test run, you'll see that test run with an instance of the test case. Now if this test has not been executed yet within this test execution record, then I can update the test case. I could add test steps, for example. I could add an additional test step in here. So I'll add step 6 and save this record. And now if we go back to the execution, if the execution had already been completed, it would have been locked with that instance of the test case, and you can see the test case here, dx6. But if I was to run this test set now and execute that test case with the identifier dx6, you'll see that the test definition has been updated, and you get the opportunity to either reset this to the latest instance or merge the current execution and stick with that execution. So in short, Xray does manage the versions that you're executing of the test cases, but there just isn't an indicator of a version ID that tells you which version you've used at any point of time. Parameterization of test cases with Xray. So in the latest version of Xray Cloud, and this is still to come on server and data center, we have the ability to add data sets to a test case. And this only applies to manual test cases, not BDD or generic test cases at the moment, but that's coming. But what we can do with our manual test cases is create a parameter or data set that can be used to create permutations of test cases. So when we add a data set to a test case, we give the data set an ID or a name, and then we have 3 options. We can add a text data set, or we can add a list data set. And that list data set can either be an ad hoc one that we create just for the test case, or one that's already been defined within the project. If it's a text data set and we create that, we can define different values in here. So maybe this is a first name field, and I can add a range of different values. Save that data set, and then within the test steps themselves we can reference those data values by using the dollar open bracket, and then we get a list of data sets. You can as well define values in here before you've even created them, and Xray is smart enough to pick those up once you've actually created the data set at a later stage. Xray is also clever enough to allow you to specify these data sets at different levels. We've just seen creation of data sets at the test level, but you can also create them at the test plan level. So if we look at test cases in here and we see that those test cases are in these plans, we could also create data set at the plan level and apply that to test cases. So on this test plan then I can drill in and I can see the data sets for the individual test cases, and I could create those data sets at the test plan level and use them across tests within the plan. You can also, on the execution side of things, if we look at the test execution or the test run record, create data sets at this level too. So if we scroll down, again we can set the data set. We're defining it at the execution level, but it's applied to the test case when we execute the test case. So Xray delivers everything you'd expect with enough flexibility to set the permutations you need to run when you define the test, the plan, or the execution. So next up then, how does Xray handle test case libraries, or rather that repository of test cases that you want to reuse across test plans and test executions? Well, if we come across to the navigation panel here and select testing board, the testing board in Xray gives us two key views as we develop and build out our testing capability. The first is the test repository, which is our library, and then the list of test plans. And what we're looking at then is that repository or library of test cases, and we can divide this up by folders and subfolders, or that repository we can manage in the usual Jira approach where we might create labels. So within our test case we could add labels in here and group and search for test cases based on label, or we can do it by component, so the usual Jira component field. So maybe we have database, so these values are set up as part of the project configuration for Jira. And then we also have this concept of test sets within Xray as well. So we can add a test to add it to a test set, or we can just view the test sets that this test case is already part of. So 4 key ways to organize your test cases: folders in the repository view, labels, components and other Jira common fields, and then test sets. And all of these can be used to then add a group, a folder, or a set of test cases to a test plan ready for execution. Result aggregation then, and this is a tough one that very few tools deal with well, but Xray makes a decent job of implementing this. The best way to view this though at the test case level is at the moment to view the old view for Jira, which incidentally I prefer because it gives us more real estate on the page, and within here we'll see the test status value. And Jira gives us a number of ways to view this with Xray. There's the latest test status, so this will pick up the latest execution for this test case in any test plan and give you that test status value. There's also the version view, so you can select the version that you might be working with and Xray will display the test result for that particular version. And then finally, thirdly, there's also the test plan, and you can select a specific test plan that you might be working within, and Xray will display the result for that particular test plan. And that approach also comes into play when we start looking at some of our reports as well. So if we drill into some of the execution reports in Xray and we look at the test coverage report, you'll find that same concept implemented. So the scope we define for the report is either latest, the particular version, or a particular test plan. I might select version 2 for example, and then when I generate that report I see the test results for that particular scope, which is version 2. Retesting then. So some test cases fail, you want to rerun them, you want to identify those failed tests quickly, group them into an execution run and complete the retest. With Xray, the easiest way to do this is from the perspective of the test plans. So we might have a test plan. And if I view that test plan, what I can do as part of creating an execution is create an execution with statuses. And this allows me to select the statuses for that execution run, and it pulls out just the failed test cases for this particular test plan and creates a new test run. And from here I can complete that test execution of that one failed test case. And using the scope concept for reporting, I can then report based on the latest execution if, for example, this was to pass. With Jira Cloud, that's as far as things go. If you want to create or search for tests across test plans or across a whole project, you are slightly limited looking for and searching for those test cases. If you're running with server or data center though, there are some advanced JQL functions that you can implement as part of your JQL queries. For example, you can use functions like test run status. So if we create a new test plan, to cover failed tests, and we create this, we could then pull in some of that advanced JQL to search for the test cases to include in that test plan. So you'll see in here as we add tests, on the add tests panel we've got the option of JQL, and we could use some JQL like this where we've got issue type is test, test run status is in failed or aborted, for example. But these functions are only available in server or data center. They're not accessible from the cloud version of Jira and Xray. Configurations and releases. When we build out our test plans and we execute those test cases, we want to be able to track which configurations or environments we're running those tests against and the version of the application under test. So how does Xray manage that then? So in Xray then, when we view our test plans and we come to execute those test plans, we're prompted with the option to set the version that we're going to run the tests against, and we can select one or more versions, and we can select the environment or the configuration that we're going to run these against. Now the version is the value set within the Jira configuration for the project, and the test environment is configured within the Xray configuration. So if we look at the Xray configuration and settings, you'll see one of the options for Xray settings is to define environments, or you can think of them as configurations, or if you're configuring your Jira project, under project settings you'll find the versions defined in this area of your project configuration. You can create additional versions there. But when we run our test plan, we set both of those, either 0, 1 or more values for both version and environment. And when we create that test run, it's then set against that version and environment. But bear in mind though, when you set this execution against multiple versions or multiple environments, you only get one execution. If you want to run all of your test plan against version 1, then run it against version 2, you need to create 2 separate executions. And the same goes for environments as well. And all of this is then usable within the reporting area, so you can go to the test execution report, and as you define the criteria for that execution report, you can specify the version and or the environment that you want that report to be run against. In summary then, the fact that Xray implements pretty much everything as a standard Jira issue type delivers a lot of power and flexibility. A little bit of that power will only come with the server or data center versions of Jira, as some of the advanced JQL can only be executed in those editions. However, there's still plenty of scope to implement a comprehensive test management solution embedded right in your project planning and issue management tool of choice.